Hello again. So I think it's time we talk about Weibo Gaming. I mean, they've done plenty to prove their worth, so I think we should. I had them around like the 7th best team coming into the tournament. I mean, sure, they were less consistent than like D+, and sure, their lows were technically lower than G2, but like, their ceiling was so high and they hit it regularly enough that like I thought they would be like more likely to challenge at Worlds than both those teams. And so like I rated them higher pre-tournament. And when I said they were like a decent team, I got a bit of blowback from people saying that like Xiaohu was a semi-retired player, they were a less stable team than G2 and D+, and so they wouldn't really do anything at Worlds. And I have to say, like, if you do hear people talking like that sort of way about Xiaohu, like saying he's a semi-retired player, like it's just a talking point that sort of came from some of the most toxic LPL and LCK like forums and communities that like only really consider the 3 or 4 best teams in the world to be like even vaguely decent. So like don't really, just you can sort of ignore that. I mean, in reality, Xiaohu was kind of like 2021 Doumbé, who could like simultaneously retire at any moment, but could also be like one of the most influential players in a World Championship team. Anyway, let's sort of just talk about their series against BLG, because there's plenty to talk about. Unlike the NRG series, where they just sort of ran over a not very good team. I mean, game 1, Weibo did get the Nico and the Rumble, which is like a strong duo. They didn't go range to counter the Zyron lane, but like the Aphelios pick into her is like perfectly reasonable, I think. Also, the Belbussy for once in this tournament was like picked in a really good situation and did really well as well. I mean, the issue for Weibo with the draft was like their lack of engaged supports, meaning that only Xiaohu would really go in for the engage on the Nico, but it was fine. Also, game 1, Weibo's level 1 play like sort of fucked their top side in laning, but like TheShy did really well in lane against Bin, and the 11-minute gank from Weiwei basically confirmed that, and the fact that Weiwei didn't die at the 12-minute fight, thanks to Chris playing really well, sort of allowed TheShy to carry the fight, and then it was sort of like, that was the game. I mean, the gank at 15 minutes from BLG shut down like a lot of the momentum and killed TheShy, but like they did pretty well. I mean, especially when like a few minutes later when Weibo, like they played around the Baron at 22, I think it was 22 minutes, and it was really clever. They just sort of baited BLG to step up a little bit too much. I mean, it was technically an int from BLG, but by threatening the Baron in the first place, Weibo sort of created it, which I think showed a growth from the team relative to the regular season. It was like, that was something they really struggled with, was playing around neutral objectives, so I think that's pretty good. And then they just sort of slowly hit BLG with their wallet. I mean, game 2 was sort of similar. I mean, their draft on this side was a little bit worse. I mean, their Caitlyn 1-2 was like a decent response into Jax, as it gave them like a solid foundation and a solid identity to build off, especially with BLG looking into a double ADC bot lane. It like opened up the Lux or the Blitz or something like that, but Crisp was way too scared to play the Blitz into the Jax, which fine, it was still alright. I mean, the Azir again then was a little weird, and like they really nerfed it with the 4-5 in the draft, but it was still a decent draft. It was just a little bit vulnerable, and you don't really want to have a vulnerable draft where you are the weaker team. I mean, their 3-minute gank was unlikely to ever work as well. That was another thing that they did really badly, and Bing got first blood right after it, but it really hurt them. But like, at least TheShy got the trade in that first blood, and then the gank from them then compounded BLG's problems. I mean, which is something that Weibo has been really good at. Like, they often move Crisp and Weiwei to compound their opponent's losses, or like to solidify their unstable losses. It just doesn't always work, and sometimes like compounds their own problems as a team. I mean, the 14-minute gank from BLG sort of just changed the game, and there's not a lot they could really do about it. I mean, Weiwei's positioning wasn't good. They did mess up a little bit, but they just accelerated Elk, and then at that point, like, he just exploded into the game and basically ended the game in favor of BLG. I mean, there was also the Dragon Soul fight, which was so poorly executed by Weibo, and the game just sort of ended at that point. Game 3, I mean, the first pick Ashe was a little crazy, but the number of ADCs picked in this draft in general was just sort of insane. I mean, the T1 influence like is genuinely just crazy. We're talking about a video about like the meta and how T1 is sort of like benefited from it tomorrow. I think I'll probably record it tonight, but do upload it tomorrow. Grace's first appearance at Worlds was interesting. It was like an interesting pick. The Akali pick from BLG was theoretically so strong in this draft, but like, it's hard to say. BLG technically had the better draft, but at the same time, like, I don't really know. I mean, BLG were able to stack Drakes, definitely. They definitely looked better early, but they got like a really bad engage at the fight after third Drake. Like, they took third Drake, I think they took third Drake, then they had a really bad fight, and then Weibo were just able to get so much work done off of that. Also, TheShy survived in a really difficult lane, which meant he got so much work done in that game. Like, I was personally expecting him to struggle a little bit in the lane, and then like not be able to do very much damage because he was just behind, but he was actually able to get so much work done. And then at the 4th Drake fight, Weibo, like, their target prio and the TheShy shepherding of Yagao was so good that it just sort of denied BLG the soul, and then they could just march straight to Baron, and the game was basically over at that point. Game 4, the bit of the draft from Weibo really let them down. Like, you just can't give over Seju, Jax, and Ori in the first rotation. I mean, that's just basically the game over right there, especially when you have like the Rel and Syndra, which is like a really out of sync combo. I mean, the Quinn pick into it like was exciting and sort of saved the drop from an optics perspective, but also it's not that good into Jax Seju, especially when like it's binge Jax. I would say BLG kind of harder on that draft, and that was sort of proven by TheShy going 0-4. The first drag take from Weibo was incredibly aggro as well. That was awful. They got suitably punished by BLG for it. Chris did sort of run it down this game, and the game was kind of over by like the 17-minute bot dive on Quinn. I mean, this game just sort of showed the dichotomy of TheShy. Like, he played well mechanically and in lane, but he got caught out so many times that he went 0-4 despite bullying Bin when they were like when they were in isolation lane. Game 5 draft was also weird. It felt like neither team was really thinking about their pick, and the game sort of exploded at the 5-minute mark. I mean, the 8-minute gank from Weiwei as well accelerated light so hard. Like, he had 3 kills on Kalista so fucking quickly, it was unreal. Also, at 10 minutes, Weiwei played really well defensively into a BLG gank using the Ornn ult and the Maokai Q to clear the wave. Bin got a solo kill on the Ornn, and TheShy definitely had a bad early game, as he also got ganked easily at 18 minutes, but like, it's just another Shy game, right? The third Drake fight, Weibo into really hard into like they entered the Ornn and the Maokai arts, but like Xiaohu popped off and that sort of really limited their losses, so it didn't really matter in that situation. They then won the game basically at the Baron, which was in a replay, so we didn't really get to see it. And then at 28 minutes, BLG like full sent at the Baron because Maokai had no ult. They did trade the Baron for Bin, which is a really good play to be fair. But then 31 minutes, Weibo should have lost, to be honest. But Jin lost the game because he smited a champion instead of the Drake when Weibo took a really bad fight, and then a good engage with the Ornn and Maokai in mid lane at 34 minutes ended the game. But really, Weibo probably should have lost that game 5. In terms of like a rough conclusion looking forwards, I think Weibo played the best they have all year and clearly showed that they have prepped for this series. So like finally we're seeing teams that actually prep for series and they're actually getting rewarded for it, because the only 3 teams that have really like properly prepped at this tournament have done so well. Like NRG used it to overperform and make quarters. Weibo used it to beat BLG, have been better all year. T1 used it to destroy JGG and LNG. So like it's definitely showing that prep's worthwhile. Maybe it's validating the tournament having so fucking long in gaps, but, you know, pain. TheShy also showed why he's the best top laner in isolation. He played very well, although I am a little worried that he may have used all his and Weibo's luck this series and just to get collapsed 3-0 in the final, especially when you consider like all the mechanical mistakes that Weibo made this series. Like, let's be honest with ourselves, like, if you could ignore Cadril being delusional, like, Weibo were not good this series. Like, they were good, but they weren't good enough to beat JDG, they weren't good enough to beat T1, they weren't good enough to beat Genji, and they weren't good enough to beat LNG. Like, so I'm a little worried about Weibo. I'll probably be rooting for them because I do just prefer LPL fans over LCK fans. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. See you in the next one. See ya.